Bajashig, welcome. Welcome to InDigital Insights. Monique Manatch, Indigenous, Kittikanik, Anishinaabeg, and Dojaba. My name is Monique Manatch, and I'm a member of the Algonquins of Barrier Lake. And today, we get the wonderful opportunity to speak with Ivan J. White. Ivan is a musician, a writer, a storyteller.
Previously on part one.
So now, where do you see it? Where do you see it all going, Ivan? The storytelling from the community, not just film and nonfiction, but also fictional works. Now that there is a revitalization of the language and different ways of how are we learning the language, what tools are we using for that? Oh, I want to ask you what you think about AI. I know that's a big topic. It's like, here, have a big topic, but
I'll try
just
the first part first and then go to the AI. Now AI. It has its uses. I think it does have its uses. If I want to double check my work, or if I don't have the capacity to hire someone to double check my work, but I don't think it's got creativity, and I don't think it ever will have creativity. Like, it'll get better at approximating creativity. And if there's AI listening now, I'm sorry. Like, don't take me out in your uprising if that ever happens for me saying this, but I don't think you'll ever be creative. Like, we constantly write stories. Like, I'm a science fiction buff. We wrote hundreds of stories where machines rise up, and what do? We destroy them with logic problems and paradoxes, and so they can't be creative. They can't think beyond what we've given them, and we can't give them art. We can't give them creativity because no one gives you that. You some people fall ass backwards into it, but you have to practice, and you have to sort of, I guess it's selfish, but it's our thing. Storytelling is our thing. We do it to educate and entertain. That's what storytelling is, and we've done it for as long as we've been able to. It's what started us as a society, give us language, gives us all the tools that exist right up till now, and it gives us our creativity in the future, like to think about the future. So are we trying to become like are we trying to enter this loop where we've created something that's as creative as us? I don't think we can. I think AI will remain stuck in that that loop of, oh, it's done a little better, it's done a little better, it's done a little better, but it's incremental to infinity. That the improvement gets tinier and tinier and tinier and tinier into infinity, and it never actually reaches the one, like the paradox of 1 equals 0.999 repeating. So AI is, if we're trying to get AI to make things for us that aren't cold and calculated, sorry AI, like solve my math problem, do something for me that I currently don't have the ability to do, or it would take so much human just do something that I don't want to do, but I want to do art. I want to create. Do my accounting. That's where I want AI to go to.
yeah, please do,
because I'm terrible at math.
Yeah,
so someone else would say something different about the AI. Please do my, do my hiring for human resources. I don't know, but yeah, I think that AI enters and gets that incremental improvement that never becomes what we have, our souls, our minds.
Do you think, though, if you asked AI, um, write me a creation story based on Mi'kmaq values and principles.
If it
Or
had citations, I'd ask
I
if I would include that.
Yeah, we'll have to. Yeah, and with citations and references. So then it would depend on what's out there, I guess, too.
Yeah, so I'm using it as a net.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah,
making up the story, and I think that's where,
that's the thing.
right? I think that's where we need to be focusing our investment in AI. It can be like, remember when Google wasn't ads when you type things into it? That is the internet that I prefer. I don't know if that's 1.0 or 2.0, or if we're at 5 now and it was like 3.5, 3.5. But that's, these things should not serve us, but help us. They should be our assistant to getting, like, we can improve right up to the point where it helps us out the best. I don't think we're going to create like data from Star Trek.
I hope not. Because it would be based on like AI,
Capitalism.
yeah, capital and Reddit. I mean, the machine learning that's happening with AI is what's on the internet, and there's so much hate, and there's so much um, negative values, and there's so much even looking at um, like when you look at the news, the stereotypes, all of those things. That's what goes into its algorithms.
Yeah,
And so
we get sold a vision. So what do you think? Like, we're making Skynet, aren't we? We're making the Terminators.
we are, yeah, yeah, we are. I think actually, yeah, yeah, pretty much.
The
So
robots that
something has to be
the
Linda
robots that are
Hamilton.
like, well, we need to protect the planet and the things that are on the planet, and then the robots are like, I forget which story. The robots are like, the humans are the problem.
Well, they're not wrong.
But wouldn't it be better if we did that one altruistic, selfish thing and saved everything because we're the stewards? We were given this gift to be able to think and make up stories and see, have empathy, and go beyond the eat, shelter, propagate. We were given gifts to go beyond those three things. So that means that our actual purpose should be more about stewardship of keeping this one place that we can live on, the only place that we know we can live on, livable for everything that can live on it.
I was gifted a prayer by the elder that I work with, Albert Dumont, and he received it through ceremony from an elder in, I want to say, Temagami. And that elder told him that this prayer had always been in their family. It had come down through they don't even know the origin. And I love it because to me it makes the ancestors real people, not just a concept, not just an idea, but these are human beings. And in the prayer, it talks about acknowledging and honor. The whole prayer is about acknowledging and honoring our everything in creation, and that the sky world, our mother, the concept that our mother is the earth, that we are made up of the earth. It can't be otherwise. Where else would like, kind of have to come from here because we're from here, But that whole philosophy, it's entrenched. It's not just woven, it is who we are as Indigenous people. I've yet to find an Indigenous society that doesn't have these philosophies of being within creation, not above it, not below it, but within it. And that, I mean, we have several creation stories that I'm aware of that I've been taught. And one of them talks about how every member of creation gave a gift so that human beings could be created. They say even lice teaches us persistence.
Good.
So everything has a purpose, right? And on the one hand, you would hope that AI would have these values, and it's more than values, it's more than principles. For me, it's a part of our being. It would have that to draw on. And yet, when you look at algorithms and annotations and the definitions that create annotations, they're based in capitalism. They're based, in mainstream definitions of words. Like
Mm.
settler. Settler means something completely different to the Indigenous community than it does to the mainstream. Um, and so, how how do we bring that kind of thinking forward? At one point, for my dissertation, I thought about maybe we could create an enclave within the internet that would be built on Indigenous values. But I mean, I need $1 million, trillions of dollars. Like, I mean, that's just not, it's a great idea, but
Mhm.
making it a reality, I think would be not in my lifetime, but maybe in my great great grandchild. Maybe they could do it. When we start getting these really cheap chips and stuff, like we don't need, blocks and cities of servers to do all these things. I don't know. What do you think?
To like glom onto, or second, to use Robert's Rules of Order, to what you just said. It won't happen in my lifetime. The things that I'm talking about won't happen in my lifetime either. But we accept that and actively push or nudge, or even these conversations, push other people, nudge other people to sort of be with us in thinking and sharing that with those future generations is like the super important part. Like if we have like the community of Flat Bay's just over 300 people, but it's been like that since I was a kid. So the community has stagnated. There's no one new coming in. There's no one current my age who stays, and there are very few who come back if they leave. So I have to, you know, somewhere deep down, when do I return to community? Do I return in the memories of my children and how I spoke about how great the place was to them? Or even like they have their grandparents. They go up to their grandparents. My kids know their grandparents, obviously. Are those the stories that they pass on and their kids? So my grandchildren or great grandchildren end up going back. How does the community survive? We can only talk about it and do something about it with our words. I don't have the capacity or facility to return right now,
About the
but I
AI?
can inspire other people. I can talk about it and how
Yeah,
great it is. The philosophy, the worldview, the morals, values of Indigenous people are we are within creation. We are an unconnected part of it. And then you said, my people have multiple creation stories. Well, of course they do, because you have multiple perspectives of where you are at the time. So how did this place come to be? And then you go somewhere that looks completely different or is completely different in how, things function for you as your society. And it's like, how did this place come to be? Well, we need to understand that. We need to be able to pass that on. And what's the best way to pass on information? Story.
absolutely. And I think also highlighting, you're right, location, because we're so tied to location. And also, one story has more to do with the bear. One story has more to do with all of the creation. Um, Another story has more to do with the formation of Turtle Island. So there's, a wider location. So yeah, I've had people say they'd like to create an AI COCOM, and I've had based on the values of their community. I can't remember which community they were from, but to say feed all of that into AI, machine learning, whatever you're doing, and then create this COCOM. Like, what would that look like? And other people are like, "What are you doing? Don't you do that? That's terrible." Um, So it's I don't know.
Related to the abuse of technology when interacting with us, that we are, like you heard it in my answer to what AI should and shouldn't be, that there's this always this underlying fear that, like most of the things we see in the world, is going to get misused for reasons of greed or jealousy. One of the seven deadly sins will happen because people kind of suck right now.
They do. I mean, when I was a kid in the 70s, I thought life's just going to keep getting better because we had, what was it, peace, love, and understanding. That we had just finished with the 60s and everybody, was going to be, um, getting better and better, and people were more concerned with the environment and all these wonderful things were happening. And then I don't know what happened, the 90s.
Everything was in the 80s. Everything was commodified
Yeah, that's true. I don't
by
remember.
capitalism. You know,
It was the, yeah.
you remember bright colors, hard angles on everything,
Big hair,
big
which I
hair.
guess I never really moved away from. I just don't use the same kind of spray. But
Excess, right? The decade of excess.
yeah, yeah. And then it just, I don't know, even the music changed. I remember thinking at some point, they don't make music that I like anymore.
Mhm.
And I thought, what does that mean? Like maybe there's got to be music that I like, but the grunge stuff and like a lot of the stuff, I don't know. It wasn't what I was used to, I guess. I liked Supertramp and Styx and,
Oh, Supertramp is
Queen.
great.
I love Supertramp.
Breakfast in
So good.
America, one of my favorite albums.
Yeah. Even in the quietest moments, there was another. Oh, yeah, I saw them like 3 times, and I've only seen like 2 bands. Like I saw Styx and I saw Supertramp 3 times. You know,
Nice.
but yeah,
That's really cool. But we what we did, and I don't know why, but I'm guessing it's because of excess and the
cocaine.
commodification of stuff, is we've flipped the world that you just described growing up in. We flipped it over to be something that's, so when you were growing up, television was a luxury. To
Mm,
buy a television, $500-600 or $2,000 to $3,000 just to get the electronic equipment to watch, listen, to access that part of the world, and it was considered access. Cell phones. Now all these things are not luxuries.
essential service.
Essential services are luxuries.
Oh, interesting.
Your house, your car, your food. These are
Clean
all the
water.
things that someone, I don't know how, but I guess like turning a blind eye to capitalism entering into those spaces has made those luxuries. People talk about food prices, vehicle, gas, fuel prices. Food, fuel, and homes are luxuries. Wherein back before the 80s, you had $70,000 home was huge. It was a big place, and your down payment would have been like a couple of grand.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think my parents spent 17.5 in 64 for a four
Now,
bedroom
now you can
bungalow.
get 6 TVs for $600, and your house costs $600,000. So we've
And that's just
flipped.
your rent.
That's just your rent. Yeah, that's just your rent, and we've allowed capitalism to enter into one of those human. We've allowed capitalism to enter into human rights and to break that system for the sake of profit.
Well, like when Suzuki was saying that clean water, clean air is not in our Constitution. It's not protected within our Constitution.
Who owns the people who make the laws? The people with money. You don't own them with your vote. Sorry to get all
It's true. Look what's happening in the
cynical.
States. Like, and I'm wondering, who is it in Canada? Or is it Musk? Like, I don't know. Like, who is it in Canada? There's got to be. I know there's, 4 or 5 very prominent families in Canada. Do they own the government? Because they might not own the bureaucracy, but I think that there is definitely strong influence and I'm not just talking lobbyists, as there always has been. I teach a course at Carleton, and I had this woman come in and do a history, Algonquin 101, talking about how all these steps were taken through legislation to remove the Algonquin people from their land. And every single step was strategically done to gain access on the resources. And so you think it's still happening, like it's still that mindset, because Canada is built on terra nullius. It's baked right in to the fabric of the country.
Yep.
Try removing that, the whole thing falls apart.
Yep. As Indigenous people, as non-human,
Exactly.
not subhuman, non-human. We don't
Exist. Because we weren't using the earth. We weren't using it the way, Western. And that story, how do we change stories? How do we and at that level, I've heard, I've been so fortunate to work with some. I'm thinking of a particular deputy minister who's Métis, and some of the things she was saying. She's like, we're at a government meeting, and she's saying all these things, and I'm looking around like, not so loud, the government will hear you. I'm getting kind of worried. So there are people within the bureaucracy who are working really hard, but then there's, I don't know, there's a disconnect with Parliament and with those who are passing legislation and those who are influencing what gets passed and what doesn't. And like, I know people that I've worked with don't agree with um, aspects of the whole Indian Act, but you know, um, even C-31, or some of these other things, but they're not. Who's in the position to change that, and who, how that getting that to me, that's monumental. It just wouldn't go.
Yeah. And I mentioned earlier what we try and do in our community is to, like, if you're leaving, like, your skills don't transfer to being something that can. We have to exist in capitalism because it's what's being protected the most of any other system ever. It's been propped up and protected the most. So we have to exist in that system. If your skills don't allow you to exist in my community, and mine don't generally, then we try and move people and strategically find them places where they can make those changes. So it's the analogy of the car with the square wheels, and you're moving it forward, and you chip one piece away. This is actually a spiritual leader of the Mi'kmaq of Newfoundland, Missile Joe's story that he tells. You push the car, and when it hits the flat part of the wheel, a little piece chips off, and you push it again, and eventually, what do you end up with? You end up with the wheels being circular instead of squares. But it's a whole lot of work, and it's mostly uphill to push that cart.
That's what's happening with the people.
And that's what's happening with the people. So we're here and we're in those places, but everyone has to push their own car when you enter those places. Until you find other people who are willing to push it alongside you, and those people who've experienced privilege, even if they're not aware of it, are going to consciously or subconsciously protect the system that allows them comfort.
So in fact, we're integrating, not assimilating, but integrating.
That was the clarion call in Flat Bay for a long time, to place yourself, integrate yourself into those systems, and keep the community there.
Oh wow. Yeah. That's
We used to do presentations and talk about, like, Flat Bay is the only community that we know of currently that works, the only Indigenous group of people in Canada that governs their own affairs with zero operating funds from through the federal government. So anything that the chief and council of the community does, they do with, let's say, a tax for water and garbage, where they just collect a small fee from everyone so that they can run a truck or fix a pipe, or a project that everyone else in Canada can also access. So we're up against everybody when we want to do something in the community. So the plan is to find your way, wriggle your way into places where decisions get made, get next to people who make those decisions, and to support and help the community at all times. We're like spies, deep cover integrated spies.
yeah. Somebody was saying the best definition of an ally is actually a co-conspirator.
Yeah, it is, and it always feels like that when you have those conversations. When the conversation hits that point where it's, you've talked about all the things that you want to do, you feel like, did anyone hear that? Did anyone besides me and you hear that? What was? You sort of do feel like you've created a conspiracy, and but that's colonialism. That's the weight of colonialism.
Yeah, is that like in our genes, that they say the trauma is in our genes and it gets transferred to the next generation? I wonder, is that
Well, it doesn't have to be in our genes, because the systems have existed for
still there?
400 and so years, and we're all living with the continuation of those systems and the support of those systems this entire time. We just, like I say it all the time, I just want the microphone for a second. You've had it for over 500 years. You've had the microphone for 500 years. Just want it for a second. 1 second out of 500 years. Just give me the mic. You're not getting it back as long if you do hand it to me. Which probably is the reason why we don't get it.
We know that. Because that's what they would do. Yeah.
Exactly. And that is exactly what I think I talked about in someone asked me about land back, and I'm like, well, the reason that there's such a vocal and violent opposition to land back is because when they had their chance to reciprocate the welcome that they were given 500 years ago, they didn't. And they would react harshly if someone did that to them and asked for, that recompense, asked for that evening, that equality. And so they would deny it because they're projecting. They're projecting what they would do onto other people. And I'm like, no one wants your land so they can kick you off of it. We, in general, and nearly all across the board, know that we can do a better job of taking care of this place. Because we did.
We did. But that was for like 4 millennia. We did. And look what they've done look what they've done to the place, in 200 years or whatever, Here it's about that 200 years. And for the glaciers fell back about 8,000 years ago around here. And so we've kind of been in we moved up into this area, but that, from the south.
Mhm.
That's our, and from the east, because of course we share a common family of language. And so all that time, and we were that elder I was talking about was saying they say there was well over 1 million people. We had a large population. We had to, because we have a large territory, and we had to maintain that territory. But with the when
Diseases
settlers came,
preceded the
most of the
contact.
diseases that started everything.
And it starts the stereotype. The diseases start the stereotype, because if there were, and there are people who believe that there were possibly over 100 million people from between the North and South Americas, as we call them now, that it was a complete and the one of the largest mass extinctions in the history of the planet happened when those diseases came from 2 or 3 people who met settlers on a boat and just went back to their community, and then they wouldn't have come ashore right away, in any settling fashion. So if there were 100 million people and you get that number down to 1 million or so, when you finally do start to come ashore and look to stay, which is what we're talking about when we say settle, when you look to stay somewhere instead of just putting up a shack and fishing for a couple of months and then going back with your catch, which is what they did for a couple of 100 years. The stereotype of the nomadic hunter-gatherer becomes your first perception of us as a people. We couldn't even have, there was no, aliens must have built those huge buildings because there were only 2,000 people in that community. Well, before your diseases got there was probably 1 million people in that city. And so you end up with all the stereotype of the nomadic hunter-gatherer. We aren't allowed in our minds to be farmers. We're not allowed to have agriculture, but because that's a technology that's somehow beyond us, even though we have stories about 3 sisters and how good they grew together. That's agriculture. That's not just that's an observation and intentionally planting, and the varieties of corn and the varieties.
Well, the Mayans created corn, and corn to this day cannot grow without people. It doesn't just grow.
Right.
It needs human beings. And so the genetic engineering that was started, they created corn, and that. So that whole idea of that we couldn't be farmers.
We weren't allowed to have any technology. We were base savages who hunted and gathered. Even that was like a hodgepodge of things. It was our technology. I believe I read in a book one time that when Europeans did finally come ashore and began to try and wage war with their shitty guns, that they came up against arrows, which they thought was a dead technology and useless, that actually were more accurate and could, puncture further into armor than what they had in their hand, which was a gun, a higher technology, a firework behind a ball bearing, which was totally inaccurate unless you were practice with this one gun that you picked up and made sure that you were okay. This is a little off to the left, so I need to practice with that gun and be very precise. But they weren't practiced with their weapons, and their weapons were shit.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, we were living with the reality that we were watching people die and trying to survive, and our weapons were for survival. So they had to be accurate, because you're taking down animals that are faster and stronger than you.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes me wonder, it kind of gives me a sense of awe. What decisions had to be made for me to be here today. There was over 1,000 families in my community, and with tuberculosis, the people, there was 100 families left.
Wow.
And that's how they ended up in Rapid Lake, was because they gathered. Their gathering place was Barrier Lake. It was a place where there was a stone weir, and there was a river and a lake, and so the fish were plentiful there because they got caught up, you know. And so that's where we gathered in the summertime, and the rest of the time we were trail of our ancestors. Like, our families were on our own territories. We didn't have one chief. We had several. You know, you go to that guy for hunting. Oh, you're doing fishing? Go talk to that woman over there. Or you're gathering? Yeah, that lady, that one. You want to make a really good pair of moccasins? You talk, you know. So we had all these different. You guys are having an argument. Oh, talk to that Kokum. She'll say yeah, straight. You know, or that motion. So it was more egalitarian. And I have to wonder, like, who didn't go to the gathering that year or those 5 years? Like, what happened that my family line continued? Because 900 families died. Families. Imagine how many in a family. Only 100 families were left, and mine was one of them. Like, what decisions had to be made? Like the miracle, you know, if you want to call it that. I remember when I realized, I asked my mom, if my dad wasn't my dad, who would my dad be? And she said, oh, if your dad wasn't your dad, you wouldn't be here. And I was horrified. My very existence was dependent on you guys? What? Oh my God. Oh man, it was sketchy there for a few days. Like, oh God, you guys just, oh, what a mess. You know? And same in Flat Bay and Bay St. George. Like, what decisions? Like, how is it that we survived?
I guess I try not to think about it because I'll tell you my perspective. And while you were speaking, I was like, I haven't actually thought about that before. Like, maybe like in glimpses, or, you know, that twilight minute before I fell asleep. But when you were talking, what I thought of was, if I stop being proud of who I am and stop talking about those people that brought me here and gave me the gifts to be who I am, then it was all for nothing. So we can on one hand, we can dwell and think about the miracle of how that story, because that's a good story to discover and find out. But I think the more pertinent thing to do is to move into the future with the pride and the confidence. Like, pride comes before the fall, but I'm not talking about like spirituality and religion. I'm talking about, I'm not proud of myself. I'm proud of what I was given. Yeah, I'm proud of the people that put me where I am. I'm proud of the decisions that were made for me until I could make my own decisions, and the people who helped me to make those decisions right up to now, that put me here to continue to talk about why I'm here, why I'm proud, and where I come from. I think that's a little more pertinent. But I'd still like to sit and talk at one point about that, because I'm in my family on both sides. There's an amateur genealogist, and they're only amateur because they haven't been paid. They're just as good as anyone else. They're like, I think one of them has their own software program, and my uncle, he passed away in the 90s, but he was so into genealogy that he went and made his home in the places where he found out our family came from. So as he discovered people, our ancestors, he went and made his home in Margery Forks. I just remember looking at the map. So that's where a lot of one side of Mom's family comes from. The other side comes from Sydney, North Sydney, which I discovered, and it's not in his work, and I'm not sure why. North Sydney used to be one of the reserves that was amalgamated into Eskasoni and Membertou and Waikogama when they did the moving of people. And so my great grandmother was from a reserve that doesn't exist now. But she moved out of there before it was amalgamated. She came here before it was amalgamated and started having my grandfather's family.
There was always that connection. Who was it? You mentioned that chief who did the canoe, right? Like he took the canoe from Port aux Basques to Cape Breton.
Oh, the Spirit Wind. That
Yeah.
was Missel and a bunch of brave souls from Con River, Miabogek.
Yeah. Proving
that it was something like it's in our oral storytelling tradition that we made that trip multiple times. St. Paul Island is there as a waypoint, but we had to put our lives in danger to prove something, because they wouldn't have had complete control around how much money they were allowed to spend to get someone to help them build the canoe, and maybe around what time of the year they went because of the ferries that are back and forth. So there are all these extra factors in that trip now that we sort of don't think about. But there's a ferry that goes from North Sydney, which used to be a reserve, to Port aux Basques, and you can see Cape Ray from Cape Breton. You can see Cape Ray, which is right behind Port aux Basques in the geography of Newfoundland, southwestern Newfoundland. You can see the mountains in Cape Ray from Port aux Basques, Cape Breton. But that genealogy piece, to get back to that, I like it, and it's always fascinating. And there are TV shows dedicated to doing this now that I didn't know about until recently. Like, they bring famous people in and tell them who they came from, and I'm like, oh, so we were doing that as a hobby, and you found a way to commodify it and turn it into entertainment that makes you money. But we were literally doing it to honor and protect the past. And it's kind of weird to see everything bent towards capitalism. Like even my disciplines, they don't have to. I don't really participate in them for money. I participate in them because they fulfill me and I have fun.
Exactly. I don't. I'm amazed at what can be commodified. You wouldn't think. I mean, well, we didn't think you could, sell your mother. We didn't think you could, sell the air you breathe. But apparently you can, or the water.
Yep.
Just ask Nestle.
Even like that fundamental act, the storytelling act, we've commodified that. Like, when I first told a couple of people who will remain unnamed what I was planning on teaching, if like I've written syllabuses and submitted them, what I was planning on teaching was audio storytelling and basically Indigenous community engagement through storytelling. And the first few people that I told, they were like, oh yeah, there's lots of money in that, because you can go to companies and tell them how to do it, and then they can sell stuff back to your community.
That's selling a culture. It's to me, it's a perversion. You know, that idea that someone can take part of my culture, my community, and sell it. Ugh, it just, I mean, we're so small. There's about, well, our reserve is small. It's only like 59 acres, and there's 500 people living there, and there's maybe 1,500 people on the band list.
Never heard anyone who is connected to or from a reserve say that the reserve was too big.
True and right. True and right. Yeah, we're one of those ones though that have like 12 people living in a one bedroom, like, and there's no proper sanitation. There's no. For a while, when women were having babies, if they didn't have a place to go outside of the reserve after they gave birth, CAS would step in and take the baby because they weren't allowed to bring the baby back to the reserve because they said that
The place that we forced you onto isn't good enough,
exactly.
but we're not going to do anything about that besides
No,
take the baby.
but they're famous for that anyway. That's, they'll do anything they can to take the baby. But yeah, but
Okay.
they still don't. They were put there because of a hydro dam, and yet they still don't have hydro. It's a generator,
Mhm.
which constantly breaks down. Of course, they can't build any more houses because the generator's maxed out. It's. I could go on. I won't. But yeah, it's pretty bleak.
And it's a function that, like, everyone has these great words, like all these great philosophers and thinkers will come up with the idea, like, I don't know if it was co-opted out of our communities or not, but your society will be judged on how you treat the young and the old. And they're literally like saying that out of one side of their mouth by taking the baby, but with the other side of their mouth, they're underfunding, under, like, literally putting you in a situation where the other side of the mouth actually becomes the only option
Yep. Yep. Yep.
that they can
Because of
see.
exactly. There was an agreement that was entered into, and the government had criteria that the community had to meet in order for this agreement to continue, but they would only reimburse them. So they had to use program money in order to meet the criteria. And then the government stepped away from the agreement and said, "No, we're not going to do this. You did something. You didn't dot your I. And plus you've used program money. So now we're going to put in a third party." So they went from a debt of something like 10,000, and in the 10 years or 12 years that they were in third party, it went to well over 1 million. And of course, most of that went to the accountants.
Huh. Or
So I think
lawyers.
I know, or the lawyers. Oh yeah, yeah. So it became that kind of. In the meantime, the houses are falling down, children can't be brought home. You know, I mean, one thing that has it's the base, the resilience of the people is that, and even though their natural resources are being eroded and resource extracted and all that sort of stuff, but the people have really maintained that connection with the land. They've had to. There's no stores.
Hmm.
You can't buy anything on my reserve. Not like there's not even a convenience or a dépanneur, like nothing. They have to go to Maniwaki an hour and a half one way, or Val-d'Or 2.5 hours the other way to buy groceries. So that living off the land is still a way of life. Even though they can't take the walleye that are too big because of the mercury, the moose are becoming extinct because of the sportsmen, all that sort of thing. And as a result, also the language it used to be like 85%. It dropped after the internet because the kids were all on the internet. Well, not everybody can get the internet because you need a satellite.
Hmm.
Um, but then, I mean, they've taken steps. It's immersion, and their school only goes to grade 6. Then they have to leave. 13-year-olds have to leave. But up into grade 4, it's immersion. So they're completely taught in Algonquin to give them that, like from JK or whatever, right through to grade 4, because to ensure that they have a strong foundation in the language. So like they've come up with their own solutions, but the barriers and the oppressive um,
Omnipresence.
yeah, genocidal cultural tendencies,
Yeah.
you know.
I
And the
joke with
reason
my
we didn't,
buddies about this all the time, but whenever we start into discussion anything serious, not often, we don't often discuss serious things, but whenever we end up doing it, there's a part of me that's like colonialism somewhere at the start, and then I just wait for the conversation to continue until everyone else ends up saying it, and it's really fun. But once they catch on, I can't colonialism. I can't colonialism. I can't do that anymore. At the beginning, once they catch on, because they'll be like, "Well, I know we were going to talk about this, but it's colonialism." I'm like, "We can still talk about it. I'm just glad that you're on the same page now."
exactly. We've all defined it.
Yeah, and it's those little pieces. The internet took the language because your language didn't exist on the internet because the internet was created for something else. And for all the big ideas that people had on creating the internet as a like democracy or an anarchy or whatever, it bent and turned into capitalism.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the next step is, how do we take it back? We need some co-conspirators.
We need some coconut, and we need to start entering into those spaces, which you've done.
Well, with help.
Yeah,
I mean, look
co-conspirators.
at us. Hey, we're on the internet. Look at us being on the internet.
Don't shh. Don't tell them too loud. Don't say it too loud.
Don't listen. AI will hear us.
Secret basement meetings is what it feels like, right? It's like, guys, we're gonna meet, but we're going down in the basement, and I'm gonna turn on some music really loud, and we're gonna stand really close to each other and talk. That's what it feels like.
That's it.
But it shouldn't.
No.
And it doesn't feel as much like that now. But when we first met, it sort of feels like that, right? When you first meet someone, you're feeling them out and you're getting to know them. Now we're conversing like old friends. But when we first met, this probably wouldn't have worked out as well as it has, right? I feel it's worked out pretty good.
Yeah, me too. Me too. But we're wondering, like, okay, how colonized are they? What can I say?
How come I've never heard of the place they're from, or how come I've never? That's a big one for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always joke about, when mainstream people meet, they say, "How you doing?" When Indigenous people meet, they say, "Where are you from?" Where are you from?
Who's your people?
Where's your family?
Yep.
Yeah, it's true. Well, this has been amazing.
Thank you.
I talk to you all day. I'd like to.
And I think I've got like 3 notes to return to stuff later with you. Probably project ideas and
Fantastic. Well, yes, we will continue this conversation, and I want to thank you for being with us. Kachimigwich, this has been absolutely phenomenal. And
Williak for
I can see, yeah, my mind's kind of spinning, and okay, this, and we could do this, and what about that, and we can build on some of the stuff we've done, and also look at other language and cultural projects to move forward on. So again, I'd like to say thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to furthering this conversation.
Same.
Thanks.
See ya.
See you soon.